Hi, this is Saturday the 5th of December, the Democratic Alliance Labour Law Report. Thank you for tuning in once again. I really appreciate it. I would appreciate it if you send this off to your family, friends, Facebook, to your associates. It's always an important report back, the weekly report back from the Democratic Alliance on the world of work. So thank you very much. This has been a tumultuous week. The 5th of December has ended a rather traumatic week for some people, but let's have a look into it. Obviously this week we had the budget reports in Parliament. I'll talk a little bit about that. We know that our government missed a payment for the vaccine, but they actually honoured the payment for SAA, so there's the government for you. We had the Labour Appeal Court case with the civil servants, and I want to talk a bit about that today. Very interesting. They've held back the judgment. Let's talk about it. And then obviously we've had the recommendations from the Minimum Wage Commission. So thank you for listening to me today. It's Michael Bagram from the Democratic Alliance. I'm the Labour spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. I've been reading an interesting book, and if anyone's interested in the world of work, maybe this is worthwhile reading. I've been enjoying it. It's by James Sussman. It's called Work, A History of How We Spend Our Time. And I just want to read one little paragraph, small thing for you. And it's the introduction, part of the introduction for the world of work by Sussman. For hundreds of millions of unemployed people scraping a living in the corrugated iron margins of developing countries where economic growth is driven ever more by the marriage of cutting-edge technology and capital, and so generates few new jobs. Automation is altogether more immediate concern. It's interesting to see that there's been so much research into this, and yet South Africa doesn't seem to understand where we're going. So when we have a look, as I said, at the budget reports in Parliament, it was the same old, same old. For some reason or other, all the departments just trotted out the same budgets. Obviously they got less money now, but no one's taken the future of this country into account at all. In particular, in the Department of Employment and Labour, they're busy scuttling around trying to juggle where they can use the less money, and they're still worrying about putting money into Productivity SA and NEDLAC and all those nice to haves, when in fact, as we spoke about last week, they're taking money away from the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration. And of course what it means, and I went down this last week, down to the CCMA, chaos is starting to reign. I went to go and run an arbitration, and it was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. Well, I eventually got in after standing in that queue with very few masked people, but hundreds and hundreds of unmasked people. We eventually got in at about 9:45. When we got in, the commissioner was harassed by everyone. There were cases, and the only permanent commissioners are working. All the part-timers have been told to stay at home until the end of February, might be March as well. And this poor commissioner desperately tried to see if he could get the parties to settle. Eventually we did settle our case, and he said, well, then he's got another 3 or 4 other arbitrations lined up. It's just impossible. You can't dispense judgment. You can't dispense justice at all in circumstances of that nature. So we can have some fancy labour laws, but if you've got no one dispensing it, well, you can forget about it. So at the budget in Parliament, I did attack the Minister of Employment and Labour for using the little bit of money that he has on nice to have projects. Everyone calls SAA a vanity project, but you must see what's going on in the Department of Employment and Labour. You know, of course, that UIF is still dysfunctional, compensation fund is still dysfunctional. Things aren't looking good, and they're bound to get worse. Now we go on to the Labour Appeal Court. This is very interesting, and as everyone knows, that government, in their wisdom, and I say that advisedly, signed a 3-year increase agreement with the civil servants 2 years ago. They couldn't afford it then, they can't afford it now. Well, they did do the first increase that year. They then went and did the second increase. Now we know that the budget for the civil servants takes up the majority of government's money, and we know that government is bankrupt. But no, it comes up to the third year, and they had a look at it and they thought if they pay this now, they'll have nothing for anything. So what did they do? They blamed the coronavirus and the lockdown and said we can't afford it, when in fact they shouldn't have got into the agreement in the first place. And so the unions, as per normal, took them to court, which they should have done in the first place, but they took them to court. And although the country can't afford it, and although I strongly believe that we shouldn't be paying the increase, I think the law is against the government on this one. And in fact, I think the people speaking on behalf of government also believe they're in the wrong here. And they tried desperately to postpone the case, to come to a settlement agreement, all those nasty little things, when they shouldn't have entered into the agreement in the first place. How ridiculous is that? They entered into an agreement that they couldn't afford, and they knew full well they went in with their eyes open. This is not the corner cafe, this is South Africa. Well, we wait for that judgment. I know the government negotiators are desperately trying to avoid a judgment, desperately trying to get to a settlement. I don't know how long they're going to take to get that judgment, but I think the sooner the better. We need to know. We need to know how COSATU and the union movement has held our government to ransom. Hopefully, someone in the government is going to wake up one day and say this tripartite alliance between themselves, the Communist Party and the trade unions should not exist. You can't have the tail wagging the dog. You can't have COSATU wagging the government. And this is exactly what we're seeing. It's sad, it's a reality, and I don't think there's a way out of that. Of course, at the Democratic Alliance, we would never have got into such a pickle in the first place. And the Democratic Alliance, where it governs, is not going to allow the trade unions to wag it. Like we're seeing in the Western Province, we are giving increases that are sustainable. We are watching the people that are being employed, and we're making sure that we don't get a hiding from the trade unions. Unfortunately, many of the trade unions have got a very strong argument as to why that agreement should be standing right now, and I think the judges might agree with them. So, at the end of the day, all I can tell you is that that Labour Appeal Court case with the civil servants is going to be very interesting to watch. We've also had one other issue this week. We've had the recommendations of the Minimum Wage Commission. Those recommendations are to increase slightly, but to increase the minimum wage, and within 1 year for farm workers to be caught up with the minimum wage itself, and domestic workers within 2 years to be at parity with the minimum wage. Now, no one's denying that the minimum wage in South Africa today is low. But we know what happens. Every time the wages increase, people get retrenched. We are at 50% unemployment in South Africa. We're still under a lockdown. We're still at level 1. Economy has not come right. It's going to take years. But now we're implementing wage increases statutory. It's going to be madness. Why are we doing this? No one understands. We will create more unemployment. So our government, instead of wanting to create the environment that would be conducive to job creation, we're doing everything in our power not to do that. So thank you for listening to me. It's Michael Bagram, Labour spokesperson, Saturday the 5th of December. I appreciate you watching. Thank you.